Look, I mean, this is a game of high stakes poker. And ultimately, if you see, I think the next move is really going to be Trump's probably going to do a 90-day, we've almost stay, as they try to figure out how they could ultimately get this sold or restructured. We think Musk is going to play a key role in terms of X and ultimately could buy this 40 to 50 billion. I believe it would be the price tag without the algorithm. Oracle could be involved as well. And look, this is a very important matter, and especially in terms of U.S.-China relations. And that's why the last thing that's going to happen here is that TikTok ultimately gets banned. They're going to work something out behind the scenes.
Dan, do you look at the social media stocks, the rival names selling off today, and what do you make of that?
Kelly, I think there was some open that this ban was actually going to happen. It was going to get enforced. Everyone knew the Supreme Court would ultimately, abide by this. And I think they're starting to realize the tea leaves, I can tell you about being the Beltway, they do not want this ban. This is a Pandora's box situation. That's why that's negative for Meta, negative for social media stocks. And ultimately, I think as this all plays out, this could be a positive if Musk ultimately really, wins this deal in some sort of consortium, that I believe other big tech players would be involved with as well.
Although we're starting to see them go back into the green. Meta, Pinterest, Snap is still fractionally lower. So maybe as this settles, Dan, maybe they're thinking, okay, maybe there's a chance. I mean, what's interesting is to watch the Chinese. If it has to be divested, but they don't choose to divest it, then that's it, game over. I mean, they could just shut it down. They could just decide not to go down that path.
Yeah, no doubt, Kelly. But that's why I think behind the scenes, you've seen Trump actively reaching out, what we've seen leaders in Beijing. I think also things behind the scenes, because they don't want to, if this got shut down, I mean, this could have a cascade effect, be negative, of course, for names like Apple, Tesla, and others. But it all comes out to 170 million U.S. consumers are on this. So they don't want this shut down. And that's why I think they're looking for workarounds around it. And I think even in the Beltway, they've recognized it's a third rail issue as they've sort of set this in motion. I think this ultimately ends up in either an ownership or partnership with U.S. tech players, and that's why I think everyone's going to be focused on it. It's a golden asset to be going after TikTok. I think Musk front and center with X.
But Dan, I put myself in the shoes of a Google, of an Apple. These companies have to decide basically Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, whatever the exact moment is, whether to allow people to download the apps from the App Store, right? They have to decide whether they're going to let notifications go through on devices, whether they're going to continue to support them, technically speaking. So if I'm them, I need to know pretty clearly that I'm going to have legal cover for what to do or not do here. This is really tough territory for them to be in.
Oh, it's a huge quagmire. But I do believe this will not be enforced. That's something, I think ultimately through DOJ, and that they're going to have to communicate that these companies will not pay fines. Remember, it's also the hosting providers as well. But that's why I get the popcorn out. I mean, Sunday morning, I do not expect that TikTok ultimately comes off of the App Store. I think that's right now, our view going into this weekend.
All right, Dan, we'll leave it there for now. But I love the updates. Appreciate you sending them out as we get new information. And thanks for joining us today. Dan Ives of Wedbush.
Dan Ives tells it like it is and talks about the recent TikTok ban and how government overreach could hurt the tech sector, especially since the TikTok ban was not even a unique egregious case. For a more egregious one, look no further than Nvidia. The company briefly ascended to an unprecedented position, becoming the world's largest company by market capitalization in 2024, dethroning tech giants like Apple and Microsoft. But now it risks losing its reign in 2025 due to the new CHIPS Act. Let's delve into the intricacies of this fascinating development that has everyone in the stock market holding their breath. Welcome back, everyone, to Investocracy.
Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang in visiting China this week as the White House announces new export limits on AI chips. The new curbs causing shares to sell off over the last several days here. How do you view these new rules impacting Nvidia and other chip companies in the year ahead?
First of all, it's pretty unclear and it's unprecedented. And what I mean by unclear is the ruling relates to semiconductors that either are purpose-built for AI or are designed for AI. And that would put all gaming chips, for example, in that category. They might be primarily designed for gaming, but they're very much designed to have AI capabilities in them. And on the unprecedented part, you're looking at 120 countries, many of them sitting in the EU, like Portugal or even Mexico, that now have limits on that. And this is all going to be managed by a government agency. And I can't think of a worse thing for innovation and speed and revenue than having a traffic cop. I think we're all in on national security, but this is the wrong answer, and I fully expect the new administration coming in to overturn most of the onerous elements of this and maybe provide some clarification.
So then, Patrick, I guess then that would lead me to believe that the market's reaction might be a bit of an overreaction if you are confident that we are going to see a quick change once Trump does enter the White House.
I mean, 2 or 3%, and on Nvidia, and Nvidia was sliding based on the perceptions coming out of CES 2025. I think investors took it as a non-issue or a wait and see until the new administration comes in.
Okay, so all these things considered, how are these companies going to be navigating some of the international relationships that they've also communicated to investors is baked into some of their own growth anticipations as well?
Well, if this moves forward and it goes into effect in 120 days, unless the new administration comes in and squashes it or slow it down, is they have to hire a bunch of consultants to figure out how to manage that. There's a 128-page document that lacks a bit of clarity. And what they're going to have to do is every company is going to come up with their own strategy to deal with this. A lot of companies aren't going to have an issue because they have nothing to do with clusters. But when you look at AI clusters, but when you look at companies like Nvidia and AMD, they're going to have to get, and even Intel, they're going to have to get very clinical on exactly how many chips that they can ship into a certain country. And I think the EU's response, that's typically pretty onerous and heavy-handed, they're even saying that this move is a step in the wrong direction and can potentially shift them in the hands of buying more from companies like Huawei, which is exactly the opposite of what this IFR is supposed to achieve.
NVIDIA's journey to the top of the tech world has been nothing short of remarkable. Rising from being outside the top 20 companies by market capitalization in 2021, NVIDIA's surge in 2024 didn't just catch Wall Street off guard, it sent tremors throughout every corner of the stock market. With AI models now requiring starting counts of 100,000 Blackwells, it's no surprise that NVIDIA is sold out for 12 months, despite boosting production capabilities through a partnership with Foxconn to erect the world's largest Blackwell production facility in Mexico. But it isn't all smooth sailing. But before going on with the video, are you into cryptocurrency? If so, check out our second channel, Investocracy Crypto. We bring you breaking news, expert analysis, and the latest trends in the fast-moving world of digital assets. Whether you're a seasoned crypto investor or just curious about the future of finance, we've got something for you. Click the link in the description to subscribe to Investocracy Crypto now. Don't miss out and stay ahead of the game. Now, let's get back to the video.
After announcing a new framework that would limit the scale of AI chips and their sale outside of the U.S. Joining us now is Bernstein analyst Stacey Raskin. Stacey, always good to have you. What do you make of these newest regulations and the impact perhaps on some of the companies you cover, in particular NVIDIA?
Yeah, it's a little hard to judge impact right now, but we can talk about like what they're doing. So they're putting constraints on the amount of compute capacity that can be shipped out of the U.S. to a certain number of countries. There's 18 countries where they're sort of like favored nation status, kind of business as usual. Customers in those countries can pretty much build as much as they want in those countries. There's a set of countries, China and Russia and other ones that are under like arms embargo where you're not allowed to ship anything. None of those things are really any change. It's in the middle, the other countries where the interesting sort of dynamics happen. Those countries have very sharp limits on how much compute capacity can get put in them. unless the customers themselves sort of agree to conform to certain standards, basically, be good citizens and the like. And if that's the case, then those customers can build in those countries, but those customers will be limited by how much compute capacity they can deploy. So if you kind of run through it, it's probably manageable for now. But my guess would be as we go along over the next years, these constraints in general are probably unlikely to loosen, right? We're sort of in an arms race with some other actors in the world, and these constraints in general are likely to tighten up. And in general, that sort of thing it's not great, right? I think right now the overall demand for this stuff is such that this can probably be worked through. And like I said, it does seem like it's workable, but it remains to be seen how these dynamics will play out as we go forward, and whether and how these different kinds of constraints continue to get tightened. And now we have the new administration coming in, which throws a whole a new.
I know that.
The U.S. Commerce Department recently rolled out a comprehensive 168-page rule aimed at regulating the global flow of graphics processing units, a field where Nvidia has a commanding 90% market share. This rule, though intended to curb national security threats, could potentially hinder AI innovations. Critics, including Nvidia, have voiced concerns that these restrictions might derail global AI advancements, although some industry experts argue that Nvidia's high product demand could cushion any adverse effects. But before going any further, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. These videos take a lot of effort and time to make, so if you enjoyed them, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This goes a long way in helping us grow. That said, back to the video.
Are your expectations they're going to maintain the rules that have been put in place?
Yeah, I don't. The companies that have been impacted, Nvidia and some others, have sort of been going at the new administration to try to, to advocate for themselves. And I got to be honest, I kind of understand why the Biden administration did this, but at the same time, doing it a week before the administration change, it feels a little shaky. So we'll see what the Trump administration does. But I want to say I'm not sure that the incoming administration. I mean, in general, this idea that we need to be tough on these other areas and we need to be U.S. first. I mean, these are things that I think the new administration is going to want. So I don't know whether or not they will be pulling these. There's some aspects of this that maybe they're not going to like, but my guess is in general over time the sanctions probably never get looser. In general, they'll probably continue to get tighter.
How do you explain to folks why you think the administration did this?
Well, I mean, it's their last chance to do something like this. And again, the general idea, like trying to control what's out there from a national security standpoint, I understand the rationale. I'm not sure I necessarily totally agree with it, but I understand it. This is their last chance to do it. And again, they're going to force the new administration, like if they want to do something about it, to do something about it. But they put a stake in the ground one way or the other with 1 week to go.
Stacey, today's highest performance chips are tomorrow's lower performance chips. I mean, how does that end up working? Is it always just that we want to stay ahead, so one day they'll be able to get these chips, or not?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think when you go through the regulations from yesterday, and we did that, it's preliminary, but when you read through it, as they're written, like I said, it doesn't seem like it's draconian as people. I think when some of the news stories on this came out last week, people were really, really worried that they wouldn't be able to ship anything, or that the amount that they would be able to ship in general would be very, very curtailed. If you look at the favored nation countries, they're the major ones where a lot of this is going, and the U.S. guys can build as much as they need here in the U.S. and they have leeway to build outside of the U.S. to a fairly large degree. So when you sort of read through it, they weren't necessarily as draconian. They were fairly severe. Don't get me wrong. I was a little surprised when the news flow started to come up, but they weren't as completely draconian as maybe people had feared they might have been. And so, but this sort of stuff destroys volatility. And let's be honest. When the new administration comes in, it's going to be volatility every day. I've said this before, but when Trump was president last time, I'm spending every morning waking up. The first thing I do is check Twitter to see what the policy of the day is. So we'll probably be going back to some of that. Volatility in general is going to be higher.
As Nvidia continues to navigate its enthralling path through a rapidly shifting tech landscape, the coming year could see the company reaffirm its standing, potentially leapfrogging Apple once more to reclaim its title as the largest enterprise globally. The signs suggest a vibrant future, with industry analysts projecting significant revenue gains and ongoing strong client demand. And with that, we leave the question to you. Will Nvidia remain at the helm of the tech industry, or will the chip regulations disrupt its trajectory? Share your insights and join the conversation. And finally, if you would like to know what companies like Nvidia have been up to these past few days, go ahead and click on the next video on your screen. See you there.